Welcome back to our workshop. Today I'm working on repairing this glider rocker. It's not gliding or rocking because it has some broken parts. This is something called a level 3 woodworking repair. It's reproducing parts so you can get a piece of furniture back in working order. I'm going to show you step by step how I go about doing this. It relies a lot on woodworking skills. And as always, I'll show you some tips and tricks along the way.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
What I need to do is take that apart, repair it, and put it back together so I can get this chair in working order.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
For our regular viewers, you would have noticed a large time gap between the last video and this one, and that's because we've been under a stay-at-home order here in Ontario. This is the first piece of furniture through the door, so I'm excited to get to it. I have produced a woodworking video on our home improvement woodworking channel that you might be interested in that shows woodworking of how to make a cat bowl holder. My daughter has an entertaining cat that's been visiting and she loves to play with water, and she's knocking over the water bowl onto the hardwood floor. So to prevent that, I've created a bowl holder that doesn't allow that, and I personalized it with her name as well. So you can check that out in the video description below. Let's take a look at the parts that we need to get this chair back in working order. I'll turn this around so you can see how this mechanism works. So here is one arm. We're missing another one here, but if I lift this up, you can see how it glides back and forth. So at the back, this is a piece here and here and here that I need to replace on the front. So this looks very similar. And what this tells me is that the way I orient this is these screws are in the back here. So this is the face that's shown instead of showing these pieces here. So I've got one here, one on this side, and also where I've got the bearings, these two screws here is what holds the bearing in. So I need to locate these areas, this side and this side, at the top. Let me turn this around once more and we'll look at the front. So the bearings are here, which means this part here has to go on the top. We've got the clean face at the front. So this one goes here like this, and then this one goes here like this. So this is what I need to remake. I'll take the glider off the bench and then we'll figure out what type of wood we need. When you're replacing pieces in furniture, you need to make sure you're using the same wood species. The grain pattern is different in different types of wood, and the color as well. If you're using the same species, the color matching becomes much easier than if you're using something that's different. Identifying a wood species is hard when you're first starting out. Here I've got a broken piece so I can tell that this is a light wood. If you've got something that's stained, it's even more difficult. So this is my first hint. The second hint I've got is if I dig my fingernail in here, I can see how dense the wood is. This is telling me, just based on my experience, this isn't a soft wood, it's a harder wood. So let me take a look at the supplies that I have. I'll bring some samples over and we'll compare them and figure out what type of wood this is. Here's a piece of mahogany. That one's darker wood, so that's not going to match. Here we've got a piece of oak. So we'll take this one out. I'll bring out some cedar so you can see what that looks like. And we'll bring out the teak. And the cherry. What else? We'll grab a piece of poplar here. I'm guessing this is probably not a pine, but we'll take a look at that. That's a softwood. I'll grab a piece of birch here. And have I got any maple? No, I don't have any maple yet. So I'll grab this piece of maple. Let's take these back to the bench and see what they look like compared to our piece. I'll start by sorting these into different colors. So the lighter boards here, and the darker boards here. Starting here, this is teak. It's a very heavy wood, a very oily wood, typically used for outdoor furniture, and it's very expensive. The next one here, this is mahogany, and mahogany is an endangered species because it was over-harvested. So it comes from different spots in the world. I'm not sure where this one's from. Brazilian mahogany is the traditional. You'll find it in a lot of antique furniture. This is African mahogany, which is less expensive, more affordable. And you can see it's got some different patterns in here. So even choosing one species, you need to figure out what's going to match best with your project. This is a piece of cherry, and cherry has sapwood on the outside edge of it. It's very light here, so that's the bark would be on the outside of the tree here. So you do have some light spots that you might see in furniture. That's typically high-end furniture. You'd never see anything like that. And this is what a finished piece looks like. This has got some garnet shellac on to tint it a little bit. Over here, this is cedar. It's considered a softwood. This one's a little bit dark. This is more typical of what you'd see in construction lumber. And again, this is sapwood, which is lighter. Cedar typically isn't used for furniture because it is a softwood. And this is a piece of walnut. This has got some sapwood here on the edge. This is a live edge piece. So here you can see what it looks like with a finish on it. It's a beautiful piece of wood when it's finished. It's got some nice rich color to it. We'll take a look at the lighter woods here. This one's oak, and you see the grain is very dominant in it. It's got a lot of little pockets in it. So it's an easy one to identify. Red oak and white oak are two typical ones in North America. In pine, pine is a light colored wood, but it's also very light. Similar to cedar, it's light for its density. The next one here, this is poplar. And you can see it's light here, and on this side, it's got a greenish color to it. So a bit of mixed color in it. It's sort of a medium, I guess a softer of the hardwoods. The next one here is birch. Birch is a hardwood as well as maple. Maple is really, the harder of maple is difficult to stain. So if you're dealing with a lighter piece of furniture, it might be maple. So what I'm going to do is compare this with each of these up close, and you can take a look and we'll see if we can figure out which one it is. I'll take the broken piece that I've got, so I've got some bare wood, and compare it to the board here. You can see here we've got a color difference. The maple is looking very white compared to the board that we've got here, so it's not maple. If we look at the birch, the color tones are somewhat similar. Let's see what others we have here. This is the poplar. You can see the color there is very different, especially with that green area. So it's not poplar. If we look at pine, it's definitely not pine. You see that it's got a yellower color to it. And also it's too light for the pieces that I'm working on here. And then we look at oak. You can see the very defined grain in the oak. And this doesn't have a defined grain. So the closest thing here is the birch. So that's what we use for this project. Now that I know I'm working with birch, I found a few more birch pieces here, so I've got enough wood for my project. On the smaller piece here, I can use this for the uprights that I need to make, so I can cut two pieces out of this. On the longer boards here, I'm going to have to cut out this long one here. And if you look closely at these two boards, you'll see they're very different in terms of the grain pattern. So I want a grain pattern that matches this, so I'm going to go with this board. I'll start by taking out the hardware. I'll set that aside. And because this piece is broken, I don't have a full length for it. This side here, you can see there's parts broken off. So I'm going to take this part off of the chair that's not broken and use that as my template. Here's a tip for you. Write the species and the length on the end of your scrap boards, and that way they're easier to find when you need to pull them out. These upright pieces have a square bottom to them, but a slight curve on the top. So all I'm going to do is line this up and mark out the top, just like this. And then I can shape that on the disc sander. To cut this piece here, this is where jigs are indispensable. On my table saw, I've got a jig here, a tenoning jig, and what I can do is set up the existing piece in the jig, just clamping it on here, and then I can line up where my cut needs to be. Then I just swap out my parts here, and I'm ready for my cut. Now, just a public service announcement. Make sure you wear a respirator when you're working with wood, because wood dust is a carcinogen. It can cause cancer. So you want to protect yourself from that. That's why you see dust collection so much in my shop and me wearing a respirator. So these parts are ready here. They're now matching. I just need to drill some pilot holes and this piece is ready. Now on these parts here, I've got a couple holes to drill. On the top here, this is where the bearing goes, and it needs a couple of pilot holes to hold the screws in. And down here, we've got a hole, it's a little bit blown out here, but there's a hole with a bolt hole through it. So I'm going to use my two broken parts here to match up, lay these out, and then drill them out in the drill press. Now pull up my Forstner bits. These are bits that drill flat holes at the bottom. And I've got a 1 inch there, so that'll be good. But inside this hole here, there's another recessed area. So I just need to find the right size here. That's a little too large. That's a little too small. So I'd rather go a little bit larger. That's just clearance for the bolt head. On the drill press, I set up a fence and a stop block exactly where I need it. And what that allows me to do is bring in my piece, line it up, and drill the hole. I use calipers to measure the depth of the hole. There, I've got a measurement, and then I come over here, measure the same thing, and make sure they're matching. Nice thing with a setup like this is once you've got these stop blocks in place, you can easily switch out bits for different sizes. And when you drill the hole, it's exactly in the same spot. Last thing left here is to drill some pilot holes for these screws here that hold in the bearings. So I'm just going to use a tape flag. You've probably seen this trick before. Just to mark the depth of the hole. And then I need to mark the location of the hole. So just line up all the parts here. Draw a line across the center. And then I use an awl to start the hole, and that'll get me exactly where I want. So what I want is the screw head just to overlap the hole. So I want the pilot hole right about there. So do the same thing over here. I sanded down all the parts to give them a round over, the same as what's matching here. And there's some details here that are rounded off in the corner. I've done the same here to match them. I'll give you a close-up so you can take a look. I've got my parts all ready now so I can apply the finish. Now personally, I find this the most challenging part about reproducing pieces for furniture. It's matching the stain, matching the sheen, and I use a process that's based on acrylics that a professional finisher showed me. It does take some time to do this, to make sure you do up the sample and make sure you got the right color before you can get to the pieces. There might be another way about doing this that might be faster, and if you do know, I'd love to hear in the comments below and share that with our fixing furniture community. I've got a selection of different colors here. What I want to do is select one that's the closest here. So ideally, I don't want to have to mix these. Oh, so that one's got some orangish color, so that'll be good. And then I want one to set the grain, the darker elements in here, otherwise it's just going to look like I painted this. So here I've got dark walnut, that might be a little too dark. Spice, that's going to be too red. Antique walnut, that might work. So I'll try these out. And the advantage of using a water-based stain like this is you're not being exposed to chemicals. So that part I do like about this process. So I'm starting with the dark stain here first, and I've got a sample of the board that I cut off. So I'm just going to apply some here and let it sit for a minute and then wipe off the excess. The nice thing as well, because I'm working with water-based products, is I just keep a water container here. I can rinse out my brush, wipe it off, and move on to the next stain. So clean up, very easy. I'm going to apply this over on this side, and we'll see how this goes. I'll leave this for about 5-10 minutes and then wipe off the excess. I'm just wiping off the excess stain here. This normally takes 30 to 60 minutes to dry, but on a sample like this, I'll heat it up with a heat gun and speed up the process. When I apply the second coat of the golden wheat, you can see how I get a layered effect here, that darker color in the background, where this is 2 coats of the same color. So this one's too orange, this one's too dark. So I'm going to try another sample with this dark first, with wiping it off right away, and then applying this on top. We'll see how that works. So let this sit for about 5 minutes, and I'm just wiping off the excess. Next, I'm going to pull out my water-based semi-gloss finish here. This is a polyurethane. And the reason you have to go through this step is this stain will look different once it's got a finish on it. So I'll stir this up. And I'm just going to apply a coat across all these. You do end up with blotchiness when you dry it with a dryer, the heat gun like that. But once I get this coat on here and let it dry, we'll get a true sense of what the color is going to look like. Now this is a pretty thick coat I'm putting on. Again, I'd never put it on this thick when I'm truly finishing it. I'm going to let this polyurethane sit for about an hour to get an idea of what it's going to look like when it's dried. It typically needs 2 to 3 hours before you put another coat on. In the meantime, I've got another project here I'm going to get started on. This will be an upcoming video. This is a level 1 woodworking repair where I need to take this chair apart, clean off the joints, and put it back together to get it in working order. Now, if you're enjoying our videos, you can subscribe and you'll get notified if you click on the bell icon. You can also subscribe to our newsletter. We send out a monthly newsletter that lists the videos that have been produced in the previous month, as well as some shop tips and some updates in terms of what's going on with our business. Check it out at wouldn'titbenice.ca. Now, one more step I'm taking is this end grain here on either end will absorb the finish a lot. And if you look at the old piece here, it's a very consistent color. So what I'm going to do is just put a very thin coat of urethane on that end grain, and what that'll do is slow the penetration of the stain. So just as light a coat as possible to get on there on both ends. I'll lay these pieces out here and you'll see there's a difference in color. Even on 2 sides of a piece there's a difference in color. So there's a variety here which gives us a little bit of leeway. Now if I look at these color tones here, the one on the left is way too dark. The one on the right is light. It matches this one, but it's too light for these other ones. The one in the middle is almost dead on for this one, but a little too dark for these ones. There's one more trick I can use. So I've got the right color combination here, but when I apply the dark stain, I'm just going to sand it a little bit before applying the lighter stain. And that should get us dialed in. I put some screws in here so I can stand that off. That way I can stain all sides, and these I'll hang up in the tool cabinet just through the holes here. So I'm going to start off by pulling out a tack rag and just get all the potential dust off this. Even if you vacuum things off, I always recommend using a tack rag. It just gets all that fine, there's a little bit of color there you can see, gets the fine dust off. Okay, now I've got the dark stain put on, and rather than using this brush that I've been using, I'm just going to use a paper towel. So I've got a small piece here. So I want to wipe it on and then wipe it off. So just a light coating. With this first darker coat stain dried, what I'm going to do now is just lightly sand them, and that'll get rid of some of that darkness and get me to the tone that I'm looking for. I sanded the top part here and not the bottom. You can see there's just a slight difference. That's just enough that's going to get me to the color I want. For the second stain, I'm going to do this a little bit at a time. I want a pretty thick stain on here, so I'm going to layer it on, let it sit for probably 5 minutes or so, and then wipe off the excess. I want a good amount of color on this. So you can see here it's just starting to turn matte in some spots, so take a light wipe off here. Really all I'm doing is removing the excess that's sitting on top. I've let the stain dry overnight, and now it's time to put on the polyurethane. So what I'm doing is putting a coat on the least visible parts. This is what I consider the inside area of these parts. And that just gets one coat on, and then what I'll do is flip it over and do the top and all the sides. And this is the most visible part. So as I put this on here, you'll see the color gets richer because of the polyurethane giving it that wet look. The stain has a dry look to it, so it doesn't look the same once the finish is on it. So with a wet coat on everything, I'll set this piece down, and you can see we've got a pretty good color match. So this process works really well for me. It was taught to me by a pro. It works well. The only problem is it takes a lot of time to go through the test samples and everything. So as I mentioned before, if you've got a different process that works, let me know. Part of the reason that the finisher is an advocate for this is there's no chemicals. This is a water-based finish, a water-based polyurethane, and there's nothing that's flammable here. There's nothing that's extremely toxic, so you don't have to worry about something catching fire or wearing a respirator because of the fumes. All the polyurethane is dried, and I'll give you a shop tip. If you've got a shop that you don't have a dedicated clean space, you can put a piece of wood over top of it, and that prevents the dust from settling on it. That way you don't end up with little nibs on top that you need to sand out. And if you do end up having a little bit in that final coat, just take the back of your sandpaper, the paper part, rub it across here, and it takes off those sharp points. Let's take a look at the colors here and see how we did. If I bring in the old pieces here and set them beside these, I think they're looking pretty good. Here's the cross member, here's the old one. Color's a little bit different, but I think that's good enough. It's going to pass. Now comes the exciting part. I get to put everything back together again. I'm going to take the chair and put it upside down here and reassemble everything. If you're enjoying this video, please give it a thumbs up. That tells YouTube it's a quality video, and they'll share it with more people. We've gotten to 40,000 subscribers, so thank you for your support. This has been a 27-month journey for us, and we're really happy that we're building this community around furniture repair. If I lift this up, you can see the swinging here. So this is the back of the chair. Over here is the front. The first thing I'm going to do is take this piece and put it back in here. This is the piece I took out to make the template. But because I have a slight color difference between the old one and the new one, I'm going to put the new one at the back of the chair where it's likely not going to be seen and save the old one for the front. So I'll put this in here, drive in some screws, and then we'll move on to the front. Now this upright goes on this bolt here and on this bearing. So I have to take the bearing out first and install it here and secure it with 2 screws. Before I can install these though, I also need to drill in pilot holes for the cross brace that goes on at the end. So I just need to line this up in the right spot, 4 inches down from this edge, and then I can drill the pilot holes and get ready for those screws. Put the bearing in the hole here. Nice snug fit. And then we'll lock it in with the screws. Now for the tricky part, to try and get all this put together. So I've got a washer on here. I need a washer down here. Let's see how this works. Just like that. Bolt it together. Haha, looking good. Now by super extending this platform, I'm able to get in here and get these nuts in here. And then I can tighten everything up, and then the last step is to put on that cross brace, which if I put on before this, I'd never be able to extend it this far. Okay, we're all set to go here. And there we go, the glider's working again. Last step is to put this brace on the front. It just goes on here. So I'll screw this on and then we'll stand it upright and take a look. Well, there you go, this glider rocker's back in working order. Now this front support here was the original one from the back, but the uprights are the ones replaced. And they match so well because I went through the process of making sure these water-based finishes were turning out the color I wanted. That's the secret. Taught to me by a pro, and you can see it works well. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's almost Canada Day, July 1st, so for my Canadian viewers, happy Canada Day, and thanks for watching Fixing Furniture.